All right, now we have FDP number 2. These problems are going to look a little trickier than yesterday, and some of them we're actually even going to use different rules for. The first rule is the same. Say it, write it, simplify it. So I'm going to say this decimal, 0 and 5 thousandths, and I'm going to write it 5 over 1,000. Now I can divide the top and bottom by 5, and I get 1/200th. If I have a whole number, I'm just going to write that as my whole number first, and then write the decimal part, 3/10. 3/10. 1 and 3/10 is in simplest form. I'm done. So here I have another whole number, 3, and 202 thousandths. So I'm going to write the 3 and the 202 over 1,000. I have to simplify that. 202 1,000ths can be divided by 2, which is 101 500ths. All right, if I'm moving to the right, from decimals to percents, I'm just going to move my decimal 2 places to the right. So here I go, alley-oop, alley-oop. This is 0.5%, okay, or 0.05%. Sorry, I think I missed the 0 before. 1.3, just move that decimal point. It's 130%. When they look funny here, they're going to look funny over here too. Like this one's extra small, this second one's extra big, this third one's going to be big and have a decimal point, 320.2%. Alright, if I'm going from a percent to a fraction, I still can follow the rule of out of 100, but it's going to get a little bit trickier here. So first 4%, not bad. 4 out of 100, simplify that, I get 1 out of 25. The second one, 2.6% or 2 6/10%. That one's really tricky. It's a very, very small amount. So I'm really saying 2.6, I'm going to put this on the bottom, 2.6 over 100. I can't have a decimal in my fraction, so to get rid of that decimal, I'm going to move it 1 to the right. Whatever I do to the top of a fraction, I have to do to the bottom. So if I move my decimal point 1 to the right, I'm going to add a 0 and call that 26 over 1,000. So basically, if I have a decimal point, I'm going to have to add zeros on the bottom as many times as I had to move the decimal point to get rid of it on top. So I can still divide by 2 and I get 13 500ths. And the last one, 138%, is 138 over 100. This is a top-heavy fraction. We know that 138 can fill the whole 100 at least once. And then now I have 38 100ths left. I can simplify that by dividing by 2. I get 19 50ths. All right, to go from my percent to my decimal, this one's super simple. You're just taking your decimal point, moving it 2 places to the left, and calling it good. So remember, if you don't see a decimal point, it's at the end. If I'm moving to the left and I don't have anything in this empty loop, I fill it with a 0. So 0 and 400ths is my decimal there. Move this one 2 to the left, and I have 0 and 26 thousandths. And move this one 2 to the left, and I have 1 and 38 hundredths. Now, you might say that was really simple. It might be easier for you to move from a percent to a decimal and then your decimal to a fraction. For me, that's a lot easier for me to think of it that way. All right, if I'm going to go from my fraction to my decimal, this is probably my trickiest one when it doesn't work out nicely. So the very first one does not work out nicely. I cannot multiply 3 to make it into 10, 100, or 1,000, not even 10,000. So I'm going to go ahead and divide. I'm going to take the number on the top divided by the number on the bottom without a calculator. So I'm going to take 1 in my box, 3 on the outside. 3 goes into 1 0 times. Now I add a decimal point and I add a 0. Okay? So now I'm ignoring that decimal point and saying 3 goes into 10. How many times? Well, it goes in there 3 times. 3 times 3 is 9. Subtract and I get a 1. I can keep adding zeros as long as I need to. So when I add a 0, I notice I get another 3. I notice I'm going to get another 9, and I notice I'm going to get another 1. I'm going to keep getting the same things over and over and over. Or in other words, I'm going to repeat that number again and again and again. we call this 3 repeating. So we're going to call this 0.3 repeating. And we write it like this, 0.3. And this bar notation, we call it, means repeating. All right, 8/9 is a similar situation. So we're going to take our 8, divide it by 9. 9 goes into 8 0 times. Add our decimal point, add our 0. 9 goes into 8 8 times. 8 times 9 is 72. Subtract and I get 8. Notice I'm going to repeat again. So I'm going to keep getting these 8s. I'm only going to write one of them, and I'm going to say that 8 is repeating. Now, you might find a trick that all of the 9s have the same pattern. So 1/9 is 0.1 repeating, 2/9 is 0.2 repeating, 3/9 is 0.3 repeating, or it simplifies to 1/3. 4/9 is 0.4 repeating, and so on. So it's kind of a nice little pattern, and it might be just easier to memorize that pattern. If I have 9 1,000ths, this one's not actually hard. Think of I have 9 in the thousands place. So there's the tenths, there's the hundredths, and I have a 9 in the thousands place. It's just really, really tiny. All right, if I'm going from the fraction to the percent, I want to put it over 100. This is really hard to do with these numbers. So I actually suggest ignoring this and saying do the decimal part first. So remember we had 0.3 repeating here, we had 0.8 repeating here, and we had 0.009 here. All right, so I suggest moving your decimal 2 places to the right. And when you do that, remember repeating meant that there were lots of 3's here. So we have to remember that when we move the decimal, that we can't fill that loop with a 0 this time when there's a repeating bar, but we have to fill it with a 3. And we have to show that that 3 continues and keeps repeating. So the 8, again, we move it 2 places. That has to fill with an 8, and we know that it continues with 8s after the decimal point. So we're going to write it as 88.8 repeating percent. And the last one, when I move it over 2 places, I still have a decimal point, but it's pretty simple. All right, give these a try. See how you do. Pause the video. And these should be your answers. I simplified them in the fraction column so that you can see what your final answers should be. All right, best of luck on your NICU check. Hopefully these all made sense to you.